So, welcome to another episode. Today we have Caleb Matthews on, who is a spiritual strategist, motivational speaker, and dream interpreter. So, welcome to today's show, Caleb.
Jivan, thank you for having me on the Vancrux Podcast. I'm really excited about our conversation today. Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks very much, Caleb. So, motivational speaker is pretty self-explanatory. Dream interpreter, again, there is obviously, I'm guessing, a lot of nuance that we'll come on to within that, but it's pretty self-explanatory as to what that is. But what's a spiritual strategist?
Spiritual strategist is really an assistant, one to help motivate individuals for connecting all three parts of their being, but especially building that bridge between the spiritual, so the invisible influence, and then our natural walk day by day. And that gets me into what I like to call the trichotomous worldview versus the dichotomous worldview, which I can elaborate on. But that's the pathway into that is helping people bridge their spiritual motivation to their natural lives. Because oftentimes in our Western culture, especially, we're taught to separate the two when the two are actually linked with that C link and helping seeing the link. Hence the name of my company, the C link.
So what you're saying is that there isn't a physical and non-physical as being separate. They are intertwined, and you're here to help people to encompass both of those because as with anything, you improve one side, the other side improves, and then the other side improves, and within 6 months, a week, 2 months, an hour, whatever the time frame is, people see a marked improvement on maybe the side that they didn't think they would.
Exactly. It's everything that happens in the natural first began in the spiritual or the unseen, that invisible influence. As you can appreciate, Jivan, yourself and listeners, many listeners here right now, myself, we are entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurial ideas don't begin just in the physical. They begin in the invisible. They begin in the invisible chamber of the heart and the ideas of the mind's eye and that reaching for that influence, which I attribute to this creativity with being in the spiritual, because nothing in the natural can happen first without it being in the spiritual. Even ancient Egypt was very, very well versed in this with the building of the pyramids, and they had a healthy respect just for that spiritual influence on their kingdoms. And I think in the same way as individuals, maybe we're not pharaohs, but in a sense we kind of are building our own pyramid, our own work through that invisible influence.
Yeah, this is the thing for a lot of people. So those that aren't on the inquisitive, well-read, deep thinking side, those that are let's call them materialists, are very much to the effect of no, you can't, you know, just sort of use the spiritual side or imagine things to create them. And actually, everything that exists in the whole world is created first in the mind of someone first. The house that you're living in was created in the mind of an architect long before it physically emerged here on Earth. The phone that's in your pocket, whether you're an iPhone or an Android person, was designed by a team of people before it came into reality. So, is that something that you're referring to where we need to be in a certain alignment before we can manifest things on the physical plane?
Absolutely. The mind is definitely a key portion of that. That would be one of the main components. And of course, the spiritual is ultimately the one where it flows from in the beginning. Like I was saying at the very start, I believe in this trichotomous worldview. And the audience may be thinking, okay, Caleb, I've never heard of a trichotomous worldview. What is that? Well, the trichotomous worldview is the three-part being and elements of the individual construct. That's what I believe that every person listening to this, to us right now, me and you, Jivan, everybody has three parts. We are spiritual beings with a mind, will, and emotions, so spirit, and then mind with a body. And oftentimes, our Western culture will promote this idea that we're just a physical human flesh, an avatar with a mind, but it just stops at the mind. The mind's a great, think tank and an idea box, a creative box for ideas, these ideas that we're talking about. But I'm even reaching farther for the link between spirit, soul, and body, not just soul and body, because I like to say that what happens in a crisis when something that goes beyond our understanding happens that we don't understand, where are those things coming from? Where are those positive things coming from? Where are those negative things coming from? So I help my audience seeing that link between the SSB method, spirit, soul, and body, and to make that practical and not woo woo or crazy or things like that. Because oftentimes spirituality can get a bad rap of, oh, it just belongs to the quacks or the new age people or the people that are into really that mystical stuff. Well, no, it's spirituality is a huge part of our world across history, across nations and cultures. Spirituality means different things to different people, and that's where I like to just whet that appetite a bit, right?
So it's not mind, body, and soul as what's seen as normal. It's spirit, body, and
Soul and
soul for
body.
you, for you, for you. So you're
Yeah.
separating the spirit and the soul as two separate items of basically one larger whole, essentially.
Yes, yes, two separate spirit and soul, because our soul still has to draw influence from somewhere. Like I like to say, one of the questions I love to ask myself and other people is, what is your purpose on the earth? Why are you here? And there can be a natural construct of an answer to that in our minds. But eventually, I'm not sure about what your answer would be on this, but I know with mine is that when I reach a point of hitting a wall, okay, I've answered all there is to answer, but I still don't have the answers for this, or that. There is a design that we're here by design. That's what I believe personally, that we are created in the image of God, a creator God that put us here on this planet to fulfill a purpose on the earth, not just being a mind inside of a flesh suit, but more to the journey than just that.
So, I mean, there's a lot to unpick there. One thing I will say is, though, is religion tends to assume that we are made in the image of God, but I would push back on that, and because we give God a human-like characteristics, anthropomorphic, where in some sense have we not created God in the image of ourselves?
I love that point. And what I would say is just going into a partnership, right? I think that we in our culture, we tend to swing. Just to use a political example, I'm not going to get political here for a minute, but a political example of left and right wing. What I mean by that is in our worldviews, in life itself, human beings can tend to be the same way. On one side of this pendulum, you can have, I'm God, I can do everything in my own strength, that I am my own God and I can have everything within my own power. And then the other side of things, you just have people who meditate, expect that God's gonna come and save them and that they're just gonna give up all responsibility, and that's not good either. I like to draw the line in the middle of, yes, we have a responsibility to manifest that DNA of design, that imprint, our own armor, as I call it, but there's still that co-laboring and walking side by side with spirit, with God, with creator, with higher power. It's like the Garden of Eden example, like in the book of Genesis, in the ancient book of Genesis. Whether people believe that worldview or not, I'm just going to express this example just as an example from my worldview, and that is that creation, when creation was made, that the original intent was for God to walk with man and woman in the Garden of Eden, not where God does everything, not where man and women do everything, but together side by side. It's like walking in the park. Like I'm sure you have your favorite walking trail, like on the in London or in the UK or somewhere where you're walking. If you're walking side by side with a friend, then there is that you have a responsibility to walk, but they also, to keep in stride with you, also have a responsibility to walk. And I believe life is like that as well too. We can't fully take on, in my opinion, because I want to say it's my opinion, everything ourselves, but we can't abdicate everything that we're responsible for ourselves either. There has to be a meeting halfway. That's just my perspective, but I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot you can go on off a million tangents. I think with regards to God and creation, I think there is a creator definitely. If you look at the teleological arguments, for example, things have a structure. We have DNA and we have arms that do things, and it comes leads on to actually what you said about purpose. So there's two sides to the coin in philosophy. One is Aristotle's side, where he says that everything is designed with a purpose. The eyes are designed to see, etc., which means that humans by default would also be subject to a particular purpose.
Yeah.
Sartre, on the other hand, believes that we are the creators of our own purpose. are put on this earth and we then design what is our purpose? Are we designed to do this? Are we going to do that? And I think there's a balance between two, a bit like yourself with the pendulum. There can be an element of both because I could train to sprint every day for the rest of my life. I will never be as fast as Usain Bolt because he has certain genetic attributes that align him to be fast at running, or someone
Yeah.
to be very super smart, intelligent physicist. They have certain attributes that I think there's a remit within which your purpose will align, and then you have a choice within that. Because this brings you on to the whole determinism versus free will as well. Because I think there is an overlay of those two things. Because if you have a determined purpose, surely there is an element of determinism there as well. Hard
Yeah.
determinism, stoicism, determinism, whatever. The problem is the hard determinists who believe everything is determined. My argument for that would be then, well, so you're telling me that someone who overdoses on heroin was determined that would, they were born to do that. I don't think that that's the case. I think there is an element of free will in there as well and choices. So that individual would have had choices to go to the cash point day after day to actually inject the drug again and again and again. So I think there is an element of choice, but there is also a determinism within that as well, if that makes sense.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly on that. There is an element of free will. That is one of the greatest gifts that I believe that we've been given by Creator, by God in life, is the element of free will to be able to choose. And there's a difference between a calling and a high calling. There's a difference between doing something that is good versus something that is built for you. And what do I mean by that? Well, little backstory for the listeners out there is that I now run my business, one of my businesses in Cabo, San Jose del Cabo, Mexico, called the Itinerant Oasis. It's a digital nomad hotspot for people who like want to work online, online content creators, workspace. And it's a customized, beautifully modernized condo in Mexico. And I've been running that business now going on my third year. And I'm an entrepreneur. I left my 10-year corporate 9 to 5 job here in Canada that I was very good at. I was one of the top salespeople. I won all the trips, got to go on all the fancy, sporting events like the baseball and the hockey and fly in the planes and get the limousine rides, do all that. But I was really bored. I was good at the job, but I had to ask myself, my spirit, ask God, ask the question, is this something that is meant and built for me as my purpose, or is this just a stop along the way? And I felt like if I would have stayed at that job, it wouldn't have fulfilled my fullest purpose and the giftings and the talents that I have in my life. I would have left things on the shelf that I would have regretted. And was that an evil position? No, I could still be there to this day, but I decided that to go against conscience is neither right nor safe. That spirit, that conscience that we have, that the human being has within each of us, is that we will follow that inkling one way or another. And I felt it was time to move on, to be the architect, as you're talking about there, Jivan, of my own purpose and destiny. And to be a victim and say, oh, well, it's just the place I've always known, I'm just going to stay here, wouldn't serve me. But moving onward was the right decision. But that's just an example of versus calling versus higher calling. And what we're doing right now, being public speaker, I've been doing this for 20 years, but I had to put a lot of this on the shelf when I worked in the corporate world for 10 years. I wouldn't be able to do podcasting, YouTube content creation, public speaking engagement sessions on a regular full-time basis if I was still working my 9 to 5, 10-year corporate job. That's just an example that things that we have every day as human beings in our workspaces and our environments we should ask ourselves these questions or this question. Am I settling for something that's good, or is the best out there for me that I need to take the courage to step into where my heart is pulling me onward?
Yeah, intuition's a real thing. We get
Yeah.
intuition about what we should do and what is deemed to be the right path. So there's an element of creating your own purpose, but also a pull from something, from somewhere. And that's an interesting point, isn't it? Where do those things come from? Is that something that, from your perspective, is the growth of your spirituality aligning you more to receive that information from, whatever you want to call it, the universe, God, spirit, what I don't care what that word is, because the words that we use have got connotations for people. So the word God, for example, can mean a million different things to a million different people. And the problem is when
Yeah.
you argue about God, then people get into arguments about what it means, and one is coming from a Christian perspective, one might be coming from within that a Protestant compared to Catholic, one be coming from an Islamic perspective, and we're arguing about a different point when the attributes that you've attributed to a God are different. But what we can all agree on is that we do have intuition, we do feel something that is maybe guiding our decisions to some regard. Do you think that is, as you said about people walking next to each other, do you think that is something that is aligned with how spiritual you are? So, for example, the corporate job situation. One of the problems with corporate jobs is that you've essentially agreed, like a social contract, that you're willing to take this job for X thousand pounds a year for you to be able to get a house and have a car and all of these sorts of things and give up your dreams. But what happened as with yourself is that that dream became a lot stronger than the need or desire to have this job to fulfill your basic needs. If you think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example, do you think that that is directly aligned to how well your life is doing on a spiritual basis?
Yes, I would say so. For me, if I get into the place personally where my career, my physical career, which isn't a bad thing, it's a very important thing, is taking precedent over my cultivated relationship with my creator, with God, with my spirituality, then I have to reassess. Then I have to do what's called a census of my senses, and just to use the terminology census from the Roman background, which one of the most famous stories that we hear about during the holiday season, during the Christmas holidays, is the nativity story. But one of the things in that story was in history, real history in the books, that Julius Caesar, Caesar Augustus, he called the whole world to be taxed. That was like a census, like a rallying call of everybody in the world's got to pay tax. Everybody's got to pay tax. And I use that as an example. As human beings, we have five senses. We have our seeing, our hearing, our smelling, our tasting, our touching. And I believe on this planet, each one of us, that when it comes to this balance between career versus walking out our spirituality or our core of existence and our purpose for which we're created, that we must take a census of our senses. And that is within our own element of and control to do that. And when we do that, then we can start to build upon that. And to answer your question there, Jivan, yes, when I'm leaned into developing and cultivating that spirituality, and I'm balancing that in the right way with whatever my career is at the moment, then that to me is where I feel the most aligned to where I'm at. And if I'm focused more or less towards just doing a task or doing something, and I'm not really aligned with my purpose, then I feel like I can be a little bit off track. And that's where I felt like in the corporate world, I could do the job in my sleep, but was I actually making an impact on people's lives fully and truthfully? And honestly, could sit back at the end of the day and say, wow, I really made an impact. No, I couldn't say that, especially in the last couple of years. And that's really why, I had to really move on because as human beings, we are constantly looking for that hit. And the positive factor, that fulfillment hit, the fulfillment hit, like to call it. And when we are fulfilled in what we're doing, then that's really that beautiful harmony for creation and for people as human beings and individuals.
Yeah, it's like a Labrador, for example. A Labrador could very easily be a guard dog, but they are in their best, or that they're their best self when they are in the water retrieving. They are, does they have a an inherent design for that, or it's something that they will excel at very easily. And it's much like ourselves as human beings. A lot of people are square pegs into round holes, as they say. They are, let's say, they're very good at sales and speaking, but they have gone into an accountancy-based job that has no personal interaction, and they wonder why they're upset. Or on the flip side, someone very introverted doesn't like people. They're in sales jobs, and they're like, "Well, much rather be sitting behind a de-" And again, I'm using the within the corporate space example just because it's easier to explain. I'd much
Yep.
rather be doing back office stuff and designing a piece of software because that's how their mind works. One of the things we have to understand, and as you said, you ask yourself questions, is to understand what it is we want. Most people don't do that. They don't like the Socratic method of asking questions, asking what it is you want. How can we get better at this? How can we do this? it's something that, well, from your perspective, do you believe that that is a real big part of spirituality is to be asking questions rather than just to say stuff?
Yes. Questions implies that there is an answer coming. And I think if we're just walking around blindly and just accepting, as you said, oh, then where's the element of free will? Where's the element of engaging with that spirituality? Where's that two-way street? Because if it's just a one-way street, we know that if water only travels one way, what's going to happen? Well, it's going to create a bog. It's going to create a swamp. There's going to be death in the water. In the same way, when a river goes in two directions, alternatively, then we have a stream, we have life. And that's the same way it's supposed to be in the spirituality. Asking questions so that there's that answer that comes from within, from spirit, from God, from source, whatever you name it for you individually. When there is that answer, then that is when we're able to actually apply those answers. Here's an example I'm going to use from history because I believe that history speaks. It's one of the main core principles of the Sea Link that I spout when it comes to my approach, and that is the story of Harriet Tubman. Now, Harriet Tubman was a runaway slave during the 1800s, during American history. And she ran from her master because she decided that she was going to either live free or die. She was not going to live on a plantation and be a slave for the rest of her life. So she ran. She ran. And while she was running and she was being chased by guard dogs and by shotguns and people that wanted to drag her back and make an example of her, she would fall asleep and she'd have these dreams. She'd have these dreams of the night season where she attributed them to God, where God said, "All right, this house is safe. That place isn't safe. That's the road where you're going to have a hay cart waiting for you that you jump into that's going to take you up to the next state and eventually to Pennsylvania, eventually to Canada." And she followed her dreams as a roadmap all the way north to freedom. And when she came back, she followed those dreams and those inclinations and those realms beyond the questions in her dream state and her dream season for the answers. And she was attributed to coming back 13 times on her own and freeing over 200 to 300 slaves with her and of course her code map, her roadmap of her dreams. And that's an example I like to use is part of asking questions is also asking questions of okay, what are my dreams saying? What is this a picture of? Because our dreams of the night season, everybody has them, are a living parable for helping us decode and understand our day by day walk on the earth.
So with dreams, then leads on nicely actually to your one of your other area of expertise. So from my understanding, we have obviously the conscious mind and subconscious mind. The subconscious mind or unconscious mind is never sleeping. It's taking in all this information, and when we sleep, it is decoding this information or maybe picking up stuff from the universe. So there's an example I used as well, coming to what or in line with what you said about I think it was Carl Jung, a psychiatrist, where he had a patient that was on about this dream, and she was in his office, and she was on about this dream where this insect knocks on the window, knocks on the car window, and during Carl Jung's sort of session with her, he heard a knock on the window, and it was the exact insect that she described in her dream. And it's synchronicity, and this is where Carl Jung comes up with synchronicity. Where does this come from? You mentioned an example, I've mentioned an example, and there's probably hundreds of other things as well. And obviously, as a dream interpreter, why does that happen? Where does it come from? What's the meaning behind it, and how can we act on it?
It's a good question. And for me, in my experience of doing dream interpretation for over 20 years and really being raised in a dream interpretation, the Hebraic dream interpretation culture is what I was raised in at the age of 6. And the many interactions I've had with people in all different environments, coming from all different backgrounds of spirituality and belief systems and dream roadmaps and how they would interpret their dreams, this is what I've noticed for myself. And that is that there are three sources where dreams come from. They can either come from our own soul, our own emotions, our own willpower, where we're just essentially dreaming what our antenna has been focused on from our own soul. That can be one source. Another source is what I would attribute to spirit, creator, God. Like it comes from a divine source, a divine positive source. And the third source, I would say, would be coming from the opposite of from a source of life, which would be, from darkness or from negative connotations, or maybe even picking up other people's junk around you. And I'm going to use examples for each of the three just to give some practical application to what I'm talking about. Well, for a dream from myself. Say I watch a movie before I go to bed, and I watch like a horror movie. I don't watch horror movies, but so I watch a horror movie. I watch it right before I go to sleep. After the movie's over, turn off the telly, go to sleep, and I dream of a horror movie of someone trying to chase me and stab me or kill me or whatever. Is that coming from the universe or coming from God or coming from, a divine source? Probably not. It's probably coming from myself because I put that in my antenna, put that in my senses, and then I started to dream it and flush it out. Another example would be for from God or from inspirational source. I'll use an example from my own life. Years ago, when I was in the Philippines, I was on a speaking trip and I was staying at a guest house in real life. And I had this dream. I fell asleep. And I had one of those vivid dream experiences where I was lucid in the dream. I didn't just remember it after. I was lucid in the moment, as real as I'm talking to you right now, Jivan. And one of my friends was standing in front of me, and he was surrounded by white light, and but his face and his body looked like he was very sick, like he had malaria. Because I've been to Africa before, I know what it looks like. I've been to hospitals where people have malaria. He just looked very sick. And so I reached out my hand, and I just felt like in that moment I needed to stand with my friend and rebuke death. Like I didn't know. But I was like, I need to rebuke death. No, this is not your time to go, not your time to go, not your time to go. So I just rebuked death and just spoke life over him. Woke up. Many months later, I saw that friend, my African friend, the leader that usually I go over to his work over there in person. And I said, Hey, Weston, in April of this month and this year, a few months ago, were you struggling with your health? Like, did you have malaria? And he said, Yes, I did. I had malaria. I was in the hospital. I was very close to death. And I said, Well, it's not your time. I just felt it was not your time to go. And that was happening to him in that moment while I was halfway around the world, focused on my business trip, focused on speaking engagement. He was struggling in the hospital over in Kenya, but I had that dream. I believe that was divinely sent by God. And there's that example. And the third example from, from darkness or from the adversary or from other elements. Say I'm on a train and I around somebody on the train that has like an addiction to pornography or addiction to alcohol. And then later that night, I go back to sleep and I dream about like some alcoholic binge or some pornographic stuff, right? Well, that can come from other people's dish or antenna. So it's always important to step back when we wake up and ask the question, where is this coming from? Is this coming from myself? Is this something that I put in the dish? Is this something that God, spirit, creator, spirituality is putting in the dish? Or is this something that's coming from a negative connotation, influence from something else or somebody else? And then that's where we can start. But I think it comes from three sources, personally.
So three sources then. So if we think about that in a logical perspective, one is from God. We can't really control that particular part of dreaming, I would suppose. But maybe if we control what we consume just before we go to bed, as you
Yeah.
said about watching a particular film that's going to, because I know this as well from personal experience that certain things I listen to, because I listen to stuff every night before I go to sleep, a podcast or um learning about some sort of new idea or whatever it may be. And sometimes the dreams at nighttime are relative to that. So I try to listen to positive stuff at night for that reason. So could we control it that way? The second is thing that you mentioned was lucid dreaming. Now I have lucid dreams almost every night as like because this is my understanding is that if you wake up every hour and a half, you would remember all of your dreams. But because we only wake up typically once, we don't remember all of our dreams. So I know that my last dream before I wake up is generally lucid, where I'm in a situation that I haven't put myself there. But then I realize I'm dreaming, and then I have control over where I can go, but only within the universe that's already there. I couldn't. go from, like, let's say I'm dreaming about being on a beach in Greece. I couldn't control well enough just to change the whole landscape there and then to be in Barbados or New York, but I can control within that remit. So, how do we control the input, first of all, to get or control what dreams we're having? And then when we're in the dream, does lucid dreaming and controlling that mean anything?
Those are great questions. I really appreciate you ask those. So to back up to the first portion answer of your question, that's what I was saying before. The census of our senses is absolutely vital. What we put in our eye gate, what we put in our ear gate, what we put in around our senses, how we guard our environment. No different than a gardener is guarding the garden to make sure that the plants and the flowers are getting the right nutrients and that the weeds aren't coming around to choke them. There is a parable in the principle. It says, if our eye is single, if singular, then our whole body will be full of light. But if our eye is focused on darkness, how great is that darkness? Well, what we put in is what we get out. It's the same as athletes and those who are in fitness and nutrition. What we are, what we eat. And it's the same way what we look at, we become. What we behold, we become. What we listen to, we become. And maybe, and more or less, more so than just consuming content, to use another example, it can be what people we allow in our lives to have influence and input into our lives. There is a famous psalm that David wrote in Psalms chapter 1 that says, the man or the woman is blessed when you have a council of people around you that are not scornful or mocking or putting you down. But unfortunately, the man or woman that surrounds himself with people that are scornful or mocking or are not people of good reputation, it can bring you into a negative place. And that's why I believe that not just our consuming of content is important, but also who we surround ourselves with, who we allow to have input in our lives. Maybe and also, yes, not maybe, also contracts. That's why I talk about the three C's in my YouTube channel and in my speaking engagements of conformity, constructs, and contracts. And I think you even touched on contracts there before, Jivan. What contracts that we make physically and spiritually have a direct impact on what we dream of. Absolutely, they do. Because if I'm into some weird stuff, I'm probably going to start to dream that out as well. But if I'm in alignment with the core of where I'm supposed to be, then that's going to have a positive reflection upon my dream life as well. That's the first question to answer, would be that. The second, within dreams and lucid dreaming, and how can we more or less stand into a place where we're having some authority over that environment, is pulling back to taking a census of our senses. And I know it's difficult, but in those moments when we're lucid, of okay, what is happening to me right now? Is it positive? Is what I'm experiencing in this dream state while I'm in the dream positive? Or is it negative? Because we oftentimes, many of us will have those dreams where maybe someone's coming at us to attack us, or we feel like there's danger, or somebody's trying to intrude on our space. And if that's the case, then that's where I like to say that we have the ability to control that dream within our connection to our spirituality and like the big brother mentality where God doesn't want us to just accept what's happening to us in the encounter if it's negative. We have the authority to say, no, this is my space. I'm going to push back against it. Like children who have nightmares is one of the best examples I can think of. If a child wakes up and has a nightmare and runs to mommy and daddy, this is what I did many times when I was growing up. My parents, my mother especially, would always tell me, well, Caleb, just because a nightmare is happening to you and you're lucid does not mean that you should accept it, but you should stand against it and say, I don't accept this. This is my space. This is my environment, my garden, my home, and I refuse that. Or if it's something positive, then asking questions, say, okay, what is this? Like comes like Chronicles of Narnia, where Lucy's talking to Aslan, right? It's like, okay, let me engage with this, right? So there's different responses in the lucid state depending on the emotional and the spiritual context.
So is the lucid dreaming a way, because not everyone lucid dreams from my understanding, is a lucid dream to say, well, actually, I'm in the dream. It's like the Alan Watts thing. I don't know if you've heard the Alan Watts dream analogy where he's like, well, imagine you could dream a whole lifetime in one night.
Mm,
You'd first, again, depending on what your goals are. You'd want to be a businessman, you want to be a millionaire, maybe you had some orgies, whatever it's going to be. Because after a while, you'd get bored. You wouldn't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again. You'd then want a bit of surprise because if you just planned everything like in lucid dreaming, it'd get boring. So you'd then want a life that showed you surprises, and you'd probably end up with the exact life that you had now, which is interesting.
Mm.
So within the lucid dream space, are we meant to try and control and enjoy the dream, or are we meant to just be aware that we're in a dream? Let's just see how it plays out, if that makes sense. It's like
It
the
does mix.
like in Inception, for example, you dream within a dream within a dream. You have to realize you're dreaming first to then realize what's going on in this situation, or do we try and control it?
That's a good question. From my experience, and this, as you said, is a bit more advanced for because not everybody lucid dreams or has these conscious awareness while they're dreaming. I will say this, and that is, I use the statement staying within our state within the fence. What do I mean by that? Well, like our property. You know, when you walk along those property lines where you see no trespassing, can't come in that property. I like to say in the same regard in dreams that if we're experiencing something in the lucid state and it's engaging with us and the dream's happening to us and with us and around us, then that's free game to engage with, depending on if it's, as I said, a positive or a negative connotation. But if something is out there, way off in the distance, and I try going chasing after it, and you feel that gut feeling, because I've felt it in these lucid experiences where it's not right to go out too far, to go out too far beyond our state within the fence. I'm going to use an actual example of what happened to me. This is going to blow your mind and blow everyone's mind. But years ago, when I was having one of my lucid dreams, and it was really an intense season where I was having almost every night these lucid dream encounters where I felt like, okay, like Inception, as you said, like it was so real, and I was engaging with the spiritual elements, with the spirituality, with the spiritual realm, and I was having all sorts of these conversations with people in my dreams or beings, things like that. But for me, what happened when I went too far was there was a specific dream where I was standing in the mist, in the fog. It was very gray and black. And off in the distance, there was like this hooded figure of black, and it looked like one of those ring wraiths from Lord of the Rings. Bad connotation already, but unfortunately, pushing beyond my environment, I was curious and also a little bit egotistical, thinking I could just push out and push beyond my state within the fence. So I pointed at it and I said, "Hey, you're the Witch King, aren't you?" Like, because I recognize that character from like Lord of the Rings, right? And then I felt this horrible feeling in my gut, and then all of a sudden, this being just starts to float up towards me with this black robe. It's looking at me in the eyes, almost like eye to eye, and I could feel like its breath, and it wasn't good. Like it was like the breath of death. And then I woke up. Well, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, I had a horrible physical manifestation in my body of pneumonia, of bronchitis, and I nearly died. And that was a physical consequence for something that happened in the lucid state where I went too far. I went way too far outside of my realm, and I shouldn't have gone that far because I went beyond my state within the fence. And what lesson I learned from that is to be in the careful care of where I am in that dream state, where God has put me, where Creator has put me, where spirituality, where my spirituality, I walk with Jesus has put me in that realm, in that place, and say, okay, this is the place I am at here in this lucid state. I'm not supposed to go beyond the no trespassing zone because if I'm trying to initiate beyond something that I'm supposed to be put into, then I can get into trouble. So I would caution the audience, if you're in a lucid state, in a lucid dream, don't go beyond where you're supposed to be because you can get into some really weird stuff.
Is that a metaphor for life as well, though, where we can say, well, this is the situation we're in now, this is where we should be operating within without being chased. So again, coming back to what we were saying earlier, there's a fine line between everything, a fine line between accepting where you are and reaching for the stars.
Yeah.
There's a balance between that. And is it a case of what you are where you are because you're meant to be there and you're meant to learn something or do something or something's going to happen? Or is it always a case of, look, this is my comfort zone, let's just smash through it? Because your dream is actually a really good metaphor for that. To say, well, actually sometimes it's not always the case of trying to break through barriers, break through barriers, break through barriers. It's going with the flow of where life is taking you and making decisions along that path.
Yes, going with the flow, 100% agree with that and staying in the moment, staying in the present, not being too caught up with what's out there on the horizon. But then at the same time, of course, to use the physical analogy as well, that in life we have, when we're driving our vehicle or when we are crossing borders, we have protocols that we have to follow. And I think that this is one of those examples where in life, yes, shoot for the stars, reach for the stars, but also beware protocols because the earth and our culture and this planet and humanity and the framework of civilization is built on obviously advancement, innovation, but also protocols. And to keep those things in balance as well too. What am I supposed to reach that is within what I'm supposed to be doing versus what is protocols to where, okay, this is the line and this is your jurisdiction of authority, and this is where you don't have authority and jurisdiction. Because when it comes to the elements of the spiritual, because in the physical realm, there are more things we can do, as you said, to reach for the stars reach. But if I use that example and I say, okay, I'm just going to reach beyond and go talk to that being, in that lucid state, then that wouldn't be the right place because I believe in a principle that the earth has been given into the sons and the daughters of men, but the heavens belong to the Creator, to God. And when it comes to the spiritual realm, it's just to be wise to really make sure where we are in these lucid dreams, as you asked about in that context of what we're doing in that. But the analogy for life as well is to have that balance. Have that balance. How we can apply that is okay, where is my environment that I've been put into that I can grow and reach for from? And where are the boundary lines of protocol where I'm not supposed to cross that line? Because if I do, it's not going to be fruitful for me. That's what I would
I
see.
tend to see this a lot when I coach clients. Like they sort of wish for a different existence. So they say, "Oh, well, my friend's doing this job, sales manager or got their own business doing X, Y, and Z." And they're like, "Maybe I should go into that, or maybe I should go into this." I was like, "No, bit like your example with the dream where there's a fence and there's a guy blocking it. Sometimes because we see the results of someone's endeavors, we think, oh, that must be the thing to go into. Oh, we need to have our own plumbing business, or we need to create the new Tesla electric car models, or whatever it's going to be. It's not always the case. We don't have to always try and imitate because imitation's not cool. Sometimes you
Yeah.
want to just be your, and yes, at this point in life, you might not see results from it. You might not see any benefit. A lot of artists see that as well, and novelists where they didn't actually do that well in their own life, but they left such a lasting legacy. Socrates is another one, of course, the philosopher. He didn't write anything down. Plato obviously did on his behalf, and he wasn't appreciated massively in his time. But for him, he didn't suffer the second death yet. The second
Hmm.
death is obviously, for those who don't know, is when people forget you ever existed. So for most people, they have kids and grandkids. When their grandkids no longer remember them, they are effectively dead because they haven't left a legacy. People don't remember them. So is there a case of that to not just look at short term benefit, whether it's in on the spiritual side, as you said, and look at maybe, well, I'm just going to do this and see what net benefit happens beyond that by using the input from the dreams, by using the spirituality side of things, so that within this physical place called Earth, we see a net benefit.
Yes. Putting on the armor that we're supposed to put on is what I is a perfect segue. What you're saying here, Jiva, what we're talking about is putting on our own armor. And what I mean by that is walking in the construct, in the DNA of the way that we've been designed on this planet and not trying to conform completely to an image of somebody else. I don't need to become Tony Robbins or Grant Cardone or Taylor Swift or Kim Kardashian completely because if I do, I'm going to sell out my individual birthright and my inheritance that I have, which is to be Caleb Matthews, which is to fulfill the purpose to which I'm here, which is my giftings. And I can learn from the people that I just listed, some of their wisdom, some of their lessons. I can learn from you, Jivan, as much as Jivan you can learn from me, our audience can. But I wouldn't want anybody to completely say, oh, I got to become like Caleb or become like this person or that person to be successful. Because when we do that, we try to put on somebody else's armor for battle that was not meant for us. In House of David, great show on Amazon Prime, by the way. If anyone hasn't seen House of David, highly recommended. But in House of David, it comes from the Bible, but in season one, near the end of season one, where David, saying the story of David and Goliath, is getting ready to fight Goliath, and he comes into the king's tent and says, I'm going to fight that giant. He's mocking our armies, he's mocking everybody, and no one's challenging him. And the king says, who are you? You're just a shepherd boy. He says, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take him down because I've done this, I've done that, I've had success before. And finally, the king relents, says, okay, you're going to be our champion. But he says, before you go, I have one requirement for you, and that is you got to put on the king's armor to go into battle. You got to do it the way that I did it. And so David tries putting on the king's armor, and he can't fit in it. He can't move around in it. He said, this armor wasn't built for me. I'm not used to these things. And he throws it away. And they're like, what are you doing? Like, you got to have the king's armor, otherwise you can't win the battle. And he says, no, my faith, my staff, and of course my sling, these tools will be enough for me to win. And we know what happened in history. David took down the giant, and the rest is history, as they say. But I use that as an example of, in the same way that Saul tried to put on David to put on his armor to do the success, to be successful, our culture tries to conjob us of to conformity. This world system says, oh, well, in order for you to be a successful entrepreneur, you got to do this way, that way, or you got to do this and that, and this approach to life. And no, it's the way that you are built, that you are constructed, that I'm constructed, that we're constructed by our contract with our higher power, with our DNA of design. That's what it is. I would encourage our audience listening right now, as you're listening to me and Jiva on this conversation, to put on your armor. Put on the armor that you have that's built, customized for you. And if you don't know what your armor is, do some self-inventory and some assessment of, okay, what brings me joy? What brings me passion is something that is just customized for me. And start to follow that. Not what you think you have to do because other people are saying it, but what truly fills you and what wires you in that way.
Yeah, it's interesting because everyone's different, isn't it? Aren't they? In the respect of some people just want fulfillment, and to the detriment of everything else, they don't care about any materialistic things. They just want to be around their horse, around their dogs. They can live in a van, don't really care. On the flip side, you've got the materialists that want to own loads of businesses, get the power, get the status. So I think even within a human life or an existence, as you said about the armor, some people don't even want any armor, and some people need like so new generation armor that it's not even called armor anymore. It's called something completely different because they are in completely different realms to each other. And this is one of the things that I think is we first need to establish what we want and to be truthful. Some people want to have 17 girlfriends and just sex. Other people want to have a family with kids, and you could argue moralistically which is right and wrong, but that's not the point because people want what they want as well. And I think it's important to understand that. And because if you can't tell the truth to the gods, as there's a phrase or something like that where it says, "You, how can you get what you want if you can't even tell the truth to the gods about what you want?" If that makes sense. People say, "Oh,
Yep,
I want this," and they're lying to themselves about what it is they want, and then they worry about the fact that they haven't got it. It's
exactly.
it's that authenticity, isn't it? As you're saying.
100%. It's a posture of the heart because mankind often looks like on the outward appearance. We look on the outward appearance. We look on the status. We look on the shell. But what's inside, in my opinion, is the most important thing of all. It's like a pearl inside the clamshell. If we're just looking at the clamshell, oh, look at that clamshell. Isn't that clamshell beautiful? Isn't that awesome? Isn't that clamshell successful? Well, we can miss the pearl. We can miss the pearl of great price. We can miss the pearl in the middle of that clamshell and of really digging deep into really what brings true fulfillment and alignment. And this is where I like to bring in my analogy of the three elements to the pie chart, and that is the important, the not important, and the average. And what I mean by that is every one of us, we have this living pie chart active in our life. We have important parts in our lives that we need to pursue and engage in. We have not important part of our lives. And then we have the average things in our lives that we need to do. And for me, one of the challenges I give myself, try to each day is what percentage of the pie chart am I giving to important things versus the not important or the average things? Is this out of balance? Am I spending too much time on average things or not important things? And I'm outweighing the important things that I'm supposed to focus on in my life. And I would highly encourage everybody, if for those of you who aren't already doing this, to take an assessment of that chart of where am I investing my time? Because time is one of the great equalizers. We all have it to invest in time. And that's really what's going to set the stage for what brings us true happiness, joy, purpose, and alignment. How are we investing our time?
It's the whole Pareto principle, isn't it? 80% of results come down to just 20% of your activities. And as you said, if it's important, not important, and average, what are those important parts that's going to make up the majority of the benefit or improvement to your life? I mean, I've got something up here, that's the wheel of life. You know, you've got your family, your career, business interests, hobbies, interests, your fitness, your inner growth, all of those things. And if people talk, like you said, to actually take inventory and say, well, where are the shortfalls in my life at the minute? Okay, my career's going great, but I've got no friends, I've got no romance, I don't know anything outside of it, no hobbies, no interests. Maybe it's about taking the time away from some of those things, the average or the not necessary, and putting it to those that are the top of the tree in terms of requirement.
Exactly. It could be somebody's, obsessed with going to the pub and watching Premier League football. Like I love watching football, but go to the pub and watch football every week, and you're investing in that. You're investing in your local footy league or your cricket, and then you're spending all the rest of the time working and paying your taxes and just doing all that, but you haven't really invested in the pool of, as you talked about, developing those relationships, developing those friendships, developing those connections where they're going to be lasting much more to than just sport or doing the mundane things like washing the dishes, walking the dog, and paying your taxes. So really, as we're saying, taking that inventory and making sure that we're balanced in the right way, where we're still living on the earth, we're still doing our responsibilities. We're still having fun. We're still doing things that make us feel fulfilled, but we're also focusing on those lasting elements that are going to live beyond us generationally, like you referred to before, Givan, where our name lives on, where our legacy lives on, where our torch is passed on, because our calling and our purpose, I believe with all my heart, is meant to outlive us long after we're gone. And if we've done that and we can provide seed and to provide a message towards somebody else to take onwards in their life, that's life and light, then we've done our job.
So coming back to the spirituality side then, because from my understanding of what you've said so far, is that that's sort of the bedrock to everything. What are sort of three practical ways or practical things that people can do to improve their spiritual state?
Yeah, three practical things that people can do to improve your spiritual state. I would say that the first element would be finding a place or a time. It doesn't have to be hours and hours, or it doesn't have to be like in the park if you're busy and you can't get out to the park, but finding time in your day to put aside to really step back, get into a place of calm, quietness, peace, and reflection, and really start to connect with your spirituality, with God, with Creator, higher power, whatever your terminology is for that. You put yourself in that place where you're like, okay, God, Spirit, higher power, just, source, I'm looking to see how I can improve my vision towards my purpose. Help reveal to me in my day by day and in my night season these areas that I need to improve on. So doing the census of our senses and stepping back and finding time away from the busyness, away from the job responsibility for a moment, for all the life responsibilities from people, from places and just really doing that internal work, that inner work with the spirit. And then the second practical tool that I would give is when you're walking in your day by day, whether you're on the tram or you're on the bus or you're going out for a run or your job place, or you're in the park, on the airplane, in transit, wherever you are, is to step back and look at your life as if it's a dream to be interpreted. Ask yourself this question. What is this a picture of? What are these parables in my day, these inner nudges and these divine nudges telling me that I'm supposed to follow? Just like Chronicles of Narnia, just like walking around in that of what are these areas around me telling me? What are these experiences telling me that I should pay closer attention to and really lean into and not disregard as just, oh, that's just a coincidence or that's just silly, but take a full account of what's happening to you day by day because I believe nothing is by accident. Everything happens for a purpose. So that would be number two. Number three would be try, if you don't have so already, to find a place or a specific opportunity, whether it be one or two or different areas, where you can express part of your joy and your passion, something that you really love to do that you really would just do for free. Like, something of, okay, I love this so much that I would just do this for free. Find an area where you're able to give towards an individual or towards a group of people to sow into. I don't just mean financially, it doesn't have to be financially, but just your time or your efforts or being your wisdom, like something you can sow into, because the universal laws of sowing and reaping are non-optional cause and effect. When you sow, you reap. When you invest, the interest is just going to come back. And as I said, this isn't just financially I'm talking about. I mean as a way of life. Find areas that you can invest what you are passionate about into people, your time, your wisdom, your energy, and who you are, and then that was going to bring back fruit for you as well. But those are the three elements that I would encourage our audience for.
I love the last one regarding um planting seeds because I'm a real advocate for that. Judge every day by the seeds that you plant, not the harvest you reap. Because in the end, as you said about the interest and things coming back to you, if you're just planting seed after seed after seed after seed, you're doing your podcast, you're doing your businesses in Mexico, wherever. And yes, you might not see initial results, or you're doing the spiritual stuff, you're making sure you're a good person, moralistic, you're reading the right things. Reading a book is not going to give you, you don't read a book and you get $30 put into your back pocket. It's not immediate. It's not immediate money. It's delayed future benefit. And people don't get that. They want, this quick, it's a hustle culture, isn't it? Oh, I need to get this and flip it within 2 minutes. It's not really how it
Mhm.
works. As they say, the old cliche, Rome wasn't built in a day. So I think they're really good points. For yourself then, what's one question you think you need to be asking yourself that you're maybe missing?
That's a really good one. I would say the question that I would want to ask myself that I could be missing more is what areas am I rushing through that I should be taking more time in? And what areas am I taking too much time in that I should be accelerating through more? So it's kind of a flip, isn't it? It's like, what are those areas that I'm taking too long on that I should be accelerating quicker? And what are those areas that I'm plowing to too quickly that I need to be stepping back and taking more time to reflect and enjoy the fragrance along the way? Because that's one of the key things that I'm just as we're talking this conversation right now that comes to mind every now and then from one of my mentors. He's passed on many years ago, but he just encouraged me while he was alive. He said, Caleb, he said, make sure to be content with the state that you are in, but at the same time, enjoy the fragrance of the journey along the way, the process, and not just be too concerned about the destination. Because you're right, Jiban, in our culture, we are so wired and programmed and encouraged that, okay, it's the hustle of gotta get this task done so I can get to the next task, as opposed to just stewing on it and bubbling like a good hot soup and the perfect temperature on the stove of just letting that simmer. There are areas that I got to let simmer more. And there are areas that need to be pulled out of the oven that I shouldn't be leaving in the oven. But that is what I would say to that. That's a good question.
Yeah, it's like the old Alan Watts thing, isn't it? It's like if the way to judge a good song was by how fast it finished, then you would basically have no songs because it would just be because you just want to be finished at 0.0001 second. But it's the fragrance, as you call it, the experience of these Beethoven symphonies and Mozart, whatever, that's they it's not trying to you're not trying to get to the end. You don't read a book, open it and just go to the last page and like, yeah, it's done. It's the enjoyment of the whole process. And I like the fact that you said, what do I need to move faster in, and what do I also need to move slower in? Because people always look at what do I need to move faster in, not necessarily what they need to slow down in sometimes, which is fantastic. Is there anything that we've maybe not spoken about that you want to sort of hit home?
Hmm. I would say the three C's. We talked a bit about contract, but construct, conformity, and contract. And we've spoken a bit about contract, but construct and conformity. These three words, construct, conformity, and contract, they all begin with con in them, which is con. And I believe one of the greatest con jobs in our day and age is for this conforming into the image of what the clone culture would say. And that is, in order to be able to do this successfully, in order to be able to complete that version of success, you have to conform. You have to build a construct, ultimately, which becomes a contract. And I would say the opposite of conforming into the negative image or the persona that the culture of this world wants to put on us is to be conformed into the image of our design. And that's where I was talking about earlier, that image of design, that imprint of spirit, God, creator, higher power. As I said, leaving the blanks for the audience will say whatever they say about that. But coming into the image of how we're created, not what others think that we should be created in. And really building that contract and being aware of covenants, contracts, and agreements. And that's one of the things that another of my mentors said to me while he was alive is contracts, covenants, and agreements. Beware of them, Caleb, because they will dictate the course of your life. And I think that's true for all of us is being aware of these contracts and agreements that we're making and to step back and say, what is the construct? What is the construct that I'm building? What's the construct in my mind, the mindset that I have, both mentally and spiritually, that I'm following that could be positive towards my growth or it could be negative towards my growth? And the conformity, have I conformed? Have we conformed to what others think that we should be doing? Versus actually conforming into that image that we were created with, which is our DNA of design, which is to fulfill the purpose to which we've been created. And that's really the element I wanted to make sure I just brought it back full circle is the three C's: contract, construct, and conform. And yeah, I think that's a really important part of our framework.
Yes, absolutely, and it's something I actually spoke about a couple of days ago with regards to self-reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he talks about exactly that. It's that if you look at anyone throughout history that has really created something worthwhile, they were all laughed at and mocked at that point in time. Martin Luther King, Nikola Tesla, all of these people. And if you are conforming under your words, you will never know what that feels like or that exists, that person within you. It's like the Ash, the Ash study in psychology where they drew lines on a wall and basically most people conformed when they knew these lines were of different lengths. That's such a bad way to live your life. Such a bad way to live your life if you're literally you basically so if you're conforming, you're putting the validation above your own viewpoint. And if
Yep.
you wouldn't take advice from someone, why do you care what they think?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's we're not meant to conform to peer pressure, even if it costs us. And that's everything that the reformers and the forerunners of history and anybody that ever made an imprint in ancient history and medieval history and current culture history is always a pushback against conformity. And it's a test that all of us face every single day. And there's a phrase in the Bible that talks about the high calling of God versus calling. And I think there's a huge difference. And one doesn't have to be spiritual to see this. That is, in life, there is a calling and then there's a high calling. And personally, for me, I want to complete the high calling in my life. I don't want to just complete a calling because anybody can do a calling. Anybody can have the job, work a job, and do something that they're talented at, but it might not necessarily be their high calling. And I want to reach a place in my life like King David was when he reached the end of his life. It said that he lived a life full of days, not half of days, not a quarter of days, not half glass empty of days, but a life full of days. And that is one of the targets that I'm shooting for in my own individual walk is that I live a life full of days, not just for myself, but for the people around me and the culture around me. That even if it costs me that social cost, even if most people are against me and they think that I shouldn't be doing that, it's still going to be worth it when I follow my own path and my design that I know that I've been put here by God, even if it's just me and my higher power, even if it's just me and the Spirit of God, even if it's just me and a few people. It's better to stand alone or stand with a few that are real than to stand in a multitude of people that are just two-faced. Because be wary when all men and women speak well of you. That's a proverb. Be wary when everybody speaks well of you, because if that's the point that we get to, then somewhere along the line we've sold out, haven't we?
Correct. A friend to many is a friend to none, as they say, a true friend to none. So where can people reach you if they want to?
If they want to reach me, my YouTube channel would be the first place I'd recommend is at the C link. So the at sign and then the and then CSEE and then link LINK. I would recommend anyone who is feeling inspired and motivated, hey, I want to follow Caleb and tap into some of his complimentary, free motivational content. I'm at the C link on YouTube. Would love to have you follow along the journey. So just if you listen to this podcast, just go to youtube.com/, at the C link and hit the bell, hit subscribe. Would love to have you on. We really appreciate that. You can also see me on my website where I've got lots of motivational content at www.calebmatthews.net. That's my brand, my company brand, the C Link, where I've got all sorts of podcast, video, audio, and voiceover spoken pieces as well, because I like to do some creative spoken piece words as well too for some inspirational stuff. And then for my Mexico business, The Itinerant Oasis, www.theitinerantoasis.com. If you're somebody that wants to book a digital nomad workspace getaway where you want to work online or continue to stay online in touch with people back at home or your business or online content creation, I have a whole condo down there that is built for 1 to 2 people where you can book on Airbnb, and it's fully equipped for digital nomads with 1 gig internet, workspace desk, and all the gadgets and gizmos you need. All you gotta do is bring your laptop and headphones and plug and play. But that's in San Jose del Cabo, Mexico, 5 minutes from the beach. Got all the amenities there. You can check it out there. Instagram, Caleb on the Runway, Caleb on the Runway, back to my modeling years. You can follow me on Instagram. And then finally on Twitter, Caleb Matthews without the E, Caleb Matthews without the E on Twitter. But those are some of the places that you can touch space with me and tune into. But this has really been a privilege and an honor, Jivan, to be on the Vancrux podcast. Really had a good conversation with you.
Yeah, 100%. And it's always good to speak with people with good knowledge, different opinions in some ways, similar opinions in other ways, and it's great to sort of get through the shit and get to the bottom of it because it's not about who is right, it's about what is right, and that's what the great thing about conversing with people is.
That's the beautiful thing in our culture that I believe has been lost in our day and age is to be able to come to the table and have a good conversation slash debate slash exchange of ideas in a world that tries to cancel people for having one perspective or another. It is refreshing. And I love these conversations. Been loving them for the last 20 or so years to speak with people from different spiritualities, belief systems, backgrounds, perspectives, and have a fruitful and enlightening conversation. And I always like to say to the audience, as you're listening right now, if you've been listening to me speak with Jivan and you're like, you know what, I enjoyed what Caleb said there, or I didn't like what he said there, then I encourage you, as I encourage everybody in my conversations, to chew on the meat and spit out the bones. Chew on the meat and spit out the bones, or chew on the vegetables and spit out the veggies if you're a vegetarian. But to consume what aligns with you and what doesn't, just let it roll water off a duck's back, and that's all we can do, right?
Love it. Thanks again.
Thanks again, Jivan. Have a good one.